I'm Johannes Göransson. I'm the Director of Creative Writing Program on campus. Together with Cleo and Annie Reardon, I curate the Dynamic Translation Lab, which is funded by the Franco Institute, so thank you for that. And also, we collaborate with the MD Arts Initiative, which is led by Rebecca Struck and Laura Winkle, who are here, so thank you guys.
Thank you.
Great. Their next event, by the way, is curator Julia Brian Wilson on April 9th. So art, people interested in art, check that out. I also want to give special thanks, of course, as always, to Paul Cunningham, who's the program coordinator at Creative Writing, for organizing stuff. The Dynamic Translation Lab, we wrote up when we started a little description, so I'm going to just read that. Translation is a dynamic activity. It makes doubles and triples out of text. It creates profound and volatile collaborations between authors and translators. It generates movement, sending text across national and linguistic boundaries. It discovers new readers who bring new experience and strategies to reading the books, generating new discussions and new ways of reading the text. It challenges stable notions of authorship and national tradition and cultures, giving rise to new lineages, counter-lineages, occult formation, and anachronistic traditions. It transforms hierarchies and established orders. To put it another way, we are interested in moving away from a very kind of traditional notion of translation as strictly being about the literary, strictly being about what's correct and incorrect, moving into an interest in maybe that corrupted space that translations have so often been accused of generating. But we're also really interested in works like Chang Yuchen's work, which brings in other media and other artistic traditions. I think Chang Yuchen is the perfect artist for our project. I'm really excited for this talk. Chang was born in China and she now lives in the US. I first saw her work at the Walker Arts Center in Minneapolis, the Ways of Knowing show. Her work is profoundly interdisciplinary, involving both drawing, language, bookmaking, and really putting translation at the center. If there's a center, I don't know, you can maybe give me 5 minutes, you can do that in the Q&A. This is how she describes her work on her website. She works in an interdisciplinary manner, writing as weaving, drawing as translation, teaching as hospitality, commerce as social experiment, and publishing as a dandelion spreading its seeds. Which I think is such an awesome description because all of the movement that's involved in that art is like an art that never stands still, it's constantly moving. Today she's going to be talking about her choral dictionary, which is a project, and I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to infringe on your talk, but it's about making a dictionary out of coral that's washing up on the beach. I think there's much to say, but again, I think I will save most of my things I have to say for questions afterwards, but I think it's something to maybe keep in mind. It's like it's just interesting to think about how it might be different from how we typically think of translation. Like, in this sense, you've been inventing a kind of language, but it's also a language that already exists. It's not about, primarily about some kind of meaning, but it's not also meaningless. It gets rid of that dichotomy. Anyway, I'm really excited for this speech and to hear you talk about your process involved in creating the choral dictionary. So please welcome Chang Yuchen.
Thank you for having me and all the works of all the individuals that have put in to make this talk happening. I'm grateful to be here. And I love this room, even though it seemed a little bit too formal for me, but the chattering before the light went dim was actually really helpful for me to feel like this is a bunch of people who know each other, and I hope this will be more conversational. So I will aim at introducing my project within an hour, and I hope we have some time to talk with each other, even though there's a clear dichotomy of stage and audience, but maybe later there can be more movement as well. And I came up with this title just in the hotel a couple of hours ago, and I will see if the title holds. I not only want to talk about the origin story of Choral Dictionary, which I've been talking about for sometimes, but I also want to talk about how it has been growing and having relationship with the word, with or without my mediation. So it is a 6-year project now, and it has a growing and switching identity that I'm trying to keep up with. It began on a small island of Malaysia. Pulau Dinawa is the name of the island, and the island was very small. So it takes about an hour to walk around and 15 minutes to walk across. And the island was made of dead coral bodies. I think it was the first day that I got there, a young man who works in the kitchen asked if I want to see sunset. So we walked across the island to the other side of Pulau Dinawan, and we were just standing on top of piles and piles of fragments of dead coral bodies that are bleached, dehydrated, fragmented, but also complete, because they have been fragmented for so long that their edges are enclosed. And I think from the first moment on, I felt a connection that's not unlike understanding. So I began collecting them, and then I can't help but organizing them into categories, like those look like branches, some look like flames, some are darker, and some are blue. Some with 1 hose or 2 hose or more than, more than 2 hose. And it was on the same trip that I stumbled upon this dictionary, originally published in 1973 for the Chinese diaspora in Malaysia. So Kamusari is a dictionary of Malay, Chinese, and English, a three-way dictionary. And I felt really struck by the example sentences, as they are acutely vivid, as if each of the sentences is a micro-fiction directly cropped from a real-life scenario, which is very different from my experience of learning, say, English. All the pedagogical materials that I used were made for me. The story seemed more or less fake or removed or calcified. However, I think maybe because Malay doesn't have such a repertoire for pedagogical materials for second language learner, the sentences actually came from life. And it also has a lot of, I guess you can see on this page, some of you might be able to read on the left top corner, it says that old man is talking about the pain he suffered during the war. Or this one I underscored, I have been wanting to go back home in village for a long time. Or on the right, in the darkness, you can still hear the whispering of those two people. 70s was a very turbulent time in the history of Malaysia, and I felt this dictionary is not unlike the corals on the beach. There are also sediments from lived experience, and the encountering of these two sediments moved me so much that I want to bring them together through this act I call translation. And I began to translate sentences in the dictionary one by one, word to word with coral bodies. For example, pamuka, derived from muka, which means face, so pamuka is surface. The second word is the sea. The sea is vast, horizontal, and contains many tides and currents. The third word, alan, means wave. And in Malay, if you say a word twice, it makes it plural. Like buku is one book, buku-buku is books. Here I draw a shadow to mimic the sonic repetition, so alun with multiple waves. Pagi is morning, so it's the upper half of the day. A day is a unit or a cycle. So the sentence is the surface of the sea waves in the morning. Dia is third person pronoun, so it's a singular subject. Tidak negation is turning its back on us. La here is a verb that has two meanings. One is to express, the other is to give birth. So I found a choral with two holes to express the two vital ways of externalization and production. Sadness is rather heavy. Inside, I think the concept of inside only exists when there's a contour of the outside. And if I put third person pronoun under a noun, it makes it possessive. His heart. He does not express the sadness inside his heart. No matter is a range of possibility towards where is an imaginary place like an island. And if I flip third person pronoun horizontally, at the bottom it's me, on top is you, because the bottom of a page is closer to the one who's reading and writing. So you is the opposite side. You and me are interchangeable depending on who's speaking. Arriving, I suppose it looks like a ship or a swan or a snail. It's going somewhere and it's almost there. Able to is flexing muscles. To visit, to locate, to find is circling in, finding, specifying location. So the sentence goes, no matter towards where you go, I am able to find you. Another cylinder, so also related to personhood, this is plural people. Varies or counting. Race is a community with shared root. Express or communicate or connect is very excited and performative, and it has to do with facial expression. Via, other prepositions are small wrenches that can redistribute energy. Language is vast, and it doesn't have clear boundaries, and it's intertwined, and it's mutating. Nationality, on the other hand, has defined boundaries. People of different community connect through national language. People, another plural pronoun. All is totality and everything. This is puppet. It looks like baby, but not quite. Jaja is colonizer. The word for colonizer has its root in traveling. So colonizer is someone who travels but doesn't go away, it lingers. They are all puppets of the colonizers. Please has both hands, palm facing up. It's a gesture of offering or invitation. Look at with two eyes. Shadow is like us but slightly distorted. Interestingly, Banyang has a repetition, but it doesn't mean two shadows. I think because if there is a shadow, there is also an object. So the word for shadow is intrinsically plural. Yourself, in the is a very gentle preposition, and inside, the mirror is a reflective surface. Over there, the other articles that I use most often are the most simple. Please look at the shadow of yourself inside the mirror. And this was taken in 2021. At this moment, I think I have about 90 sentences. And this is my studio at a time, and it keeps evolving, and I call the different iterations of my studio offices of Pharaoh literacy. And it became a problem when I'm invited to show the language, because I realized that instead of showing it, I'm more interested in teaching it. And I find myself obsessed with the display mechanism that's more like a classroom. So I'm always asking galleries or museums to make me table instead of walls. For example, this was in Beijing in 2024, and I had 60 sentences. And this was in Walker, where I had 48 sentences and some choral pieces. I do think table evoke a kind of looking that's more tentative, and you tend to stay longer since they ask you to make this extra gesture that is looking down. If it's on the wall, it's so easy to be seen, but also so easy to be passed by. For exhibitions overseas, I started to counterfeit corals. These are made of clay because I don't want to ship actual corals, and it became a problem for me. And I thought clay corals would just be the rumors in relation to the truth that is in my studio. But through dispersing the rumors, I have came to identify with it in the same way that my English is not Shakespeare's English. I think maybe only counterfeit can circulate, and counterfeit is what I have. Maybe the prototype of a language doesn't need to travel. And in the spirit of teaching the language instead of showing it, I started to create these performative lectures, but in my heart they're actually lectures. But since I'm not invited to teach in a linguistic department, but in galleries, I call them performance. This is one iteration where I invited someone who can speak Bahasa Melayu, Mandarin Chinese, and English to read the dictionary at the same time. And another iteration where I opened up the accordion book, which I will show later, and introduced the etymology of every word, and over 40 minutes. And for example, this one is beginning. So beginning is an embryo, it's just emerging. As I moved to the end of the room, the last page of the dictionary, a friend picked the dictionary up from the other side, and we had a conversation while folding the book, while walking towards each other. And after that conversation, I invited some audience to translate chorals that I have not translated but brought to the space. And I felt it was a very successful social experiment because every word they translated made total sense to me, and I could feel the rest of the room was nodding along as well. I now believe that it is possible to create a dialect within 40-50 minutes. And it is, after all, not a private language. And at Walker, I also throw in a performance on top of a show because I partially must still feel so attached to the sentences that I have to talk around them. And at the time, Walker was preparing a show for Kristen Sung-Kim, an American artist who works a lot with ASL. So the museum staff are all taking ASL classes, and I had 3 live interpreter of ASL of my performance. In fact, I started to learn ASL just earlier last year. I've been wanting to learn it for a long time, but I had this fear because chorals are also bodies gesturing. I was worried that if I learn ASL, it would influence me too much. But at a certain point, I just decided that it's really silly to be afraid of learning something, and I did, and it turned out there were a lot of coincidences. For example, This means personhood, co-worker, partner, teacher, just like how I've translated in chorus, because cylinder is the shape we are. And I also noticed that in conversations and in performances, my hands becoming more and more active. Even though I don't know how to sign a lot of words, but my hands want to be part of the conversation. And I have also been emulating the shape of the chorus with my hand. Another way of distributing this language has been the dictionary, which I think was a very normal or natural next step. It comes hand in hand with the development of the language, like printing capitalism and the standardization of English, or the moving letterpress and the implementation of Mandarin Chinese. So in order to implement and standardize my own language, I published this dictionary in collaboration with my friends. Although as a toolbook it is only useful to myself, the page number on top actually referred to the original red dictionary commissary, and the number here signifies the order of the sentence. The word on the left is short story. It's a small piece of language, and the word on the right is protest, so it's making a gesture like this. You and me. Politic and exhale. Exhale is moving, but a bit unwillingly. And this is another version of the dictionary that is accordion. This was published in 2022, and it included 216 words that I had at a time. This is moving, is that okay? And I imagine I have somewhere around 300 words at this moment, so I'm hoping to have volume 2 in a couple of years. A strange thing that happened after the publication of this book is somehow as a language, since it took the form of a book, it became more legit. As a language, it made its way into libraries, and it also, in many ways, functions as a conduit of conversations. And the materialized words brace me and brace my literacy, and has offered me opportunities to introduce the language in a more formal way. Other publishing attempts, this was one word, sadly was broken, it's a word for poetry, and 3 pieces of artifacts comes in this envelope. This was a calendar made of 12 words. So January is emerging, February is ask, July is to leave, and October liberation, freedom, November is tired. Tired is when you want to lie down but you can't. December is take care. This calendar later was enlarged onto the windows of a museum in Hong Kong. And a friend of mine who's a musician wanted to release a record called Touch the 10,000 Things Without Attachment, which was a rather capricious translation of a line from Lao Tzu. And he asked me to translate detachment or independency, but I don't have that word yet. However, I have negation and dependency. So dependency is a shape that links, that cannot stand on its own. So front and back together, it will be without attachment. This is a sentence made of lithograph, and the sentence has 4 words. The first is to cut or to injure. This is the article ze. Tinga, this verb means to leave, but it also means to stay. And my understanding of it is, if you all leave the room, I stay. You only say stay when there is also a leaving. So to stay and to leave are two sides of one event. This choral has this momentum of moving forward, but it is also anchored. Bakat is scar. The word for scar in Malay also means talent. Maybe both scar and talent are marks. That injury left scar is a sentence. I also publish books for other people. So far I've published for my mom and my best friend. This is my friend's novel. It's called Little Bull. And you might recognize this choral. It actually means full or totality or all. When this book was published, I was in China and my chorals were in New York. So I wasn't able to find a new one for the bow. So I decided bow and full are synonyms and they will share one choral. This is a recent publication which I also brought a copy of. It's 24 words that has to do with personhood, which I now think is a bit narcissistic because many people see choral dictionary or likes choral dictionary because it's non-human centric, yet the first collection of vocabularies that I gathered are the words that has to do with us, this cylinder species. But I also think it makes a lot of sense because, of course, we're looking at reflections. So the first lines are 8 pronouns, third person pronoun, the self, the population with this head count connotation, and as including you, as excluding you, me and you. And these are all kinship terms, so younger brother, older brother, fiancé. And social roles such as spirit, fisherman, princess, ghost, colonizer, also has its root in pen. And police is an organization with weapon, and protester you have already seen. This page I might ask you kindly to not photograph because it's not my leg, but it is a new form of distribution that happened recently. I was commissioned to make a drawing for an organization that went bankrupt but then reopened. So they asked me to draw the choral that means reincarnation, which I do not have. So I used the word to live and again to put them together, make reincarnation, or sorry, maybe not photoing this one. Sorry. To live again. And the drawing was collected by an unknown stranger, and sometime later I received this photo in my email. And they've decided to inscribe the 2 words onto their body, which felt extremely serious and honorable to me. I think in many cultures, tattoo had functioned as some kind of writing system. Tattoo shows your address, your family ties, and your origin. And I had not seen that choral dictionary has a potential of being written on the human flesh. And recently I was invited to do one myself, very badly. This friend of mine, he used choral dictionary as a deviation tool. He just opened a random page and that would be the word for the day. And I was trusted enough to tattoo this onto his arm badly. So exhibition, performance, publication, tattoo. So far are 4 ways of distribution of this language. And, sorry, I need to exit for a moment. And I don't think what I do is so innovative or special. In fact, making Core Dictionary had made me realize a much longer tradition of people seeing meaning in nature. An obvious example is Mandarin Chinese. And you can see in the beginning the shape of it has to do with the texture of the stone, which it was, with the bone which it was carved onto. But later, Chinese started to be carved onto bamboo. And the fiber of bamboo is very hard, which decided the shape of Mandarin. It has very strict corners because it is really hard to make circular motion. On the right, you can see Tammo written on palm leaves. And palm leaf is very delicate, so you actually have to go curvy and circular, otherwise it would penetrate the shape. Not only we see meaning in nature, but the substrate of writing coming from nature had its feedback on how the writing were shaped. And that's how Tamil looks like on the right in modern days, and how Mandarin Chinese looks like on the left, echoing their earlier embodiment of bamboo and palm leaf. And I was reading Tim Eagle's book on lines, so he talked about all kinds of lines, weaving, walking, writing as well. And he pointed out that the letter A came from hieroglyph, came from the ox head. And I heard Cecilia Vicuña was here some time ago, and Kipu, of course, is another tradition of writing or record keeping that is made of llama's hair. And the region, the size, and the intensity of Inca Empire was as big as the territory of Lama. So nature's influence on writing is not only when you use it to write, but actually when you co-inhabit a area or a patch of land on Earth, your writing is informed by your co-inhabitors, in this case Lama and Kipu. And this is Hango, which is a very encouraging example for me because this language was actually made by one king. So it was one person language, but implemented to his people. I don't have a people, but I think it's good to know there is that potential. And the shape of Hango actually describes the placement and the shape of your throat, your tongue, and your mouth. When I say nature, I guess I don't exclude human. Language came from human and non-human beings. Language comes from all kinds of bodies. Let me see if I can click this. This is a collective, two artists, and they're making a language based on the marks of beaver chewing wood. And this mark is not only decided by the kind or the age of the beaver, but also the kind of tree that grows around there. So this mark differs from region to region, from river to river. Yes. Chang is an author that I really love. He has a short story, The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling, in which a French missionary was teaching the quote-unquote European art of writing to a village kid, Jijinji. And the French missionary said, we have this art, when a person speaks, we write it down, we make marks, and if another person comes and he can see the marks and know what the first person said, even though he was not here. And that is called writing. And Jijinji thought of his village elder, who is the best at bushcraft. And Jijinji said, where you see just disturbed grass, this elder can see a leper was here and dragged the goat that way. He was not there, but he can tell from the marks what had happened. And this is not unlike the European art that is writing. And Zhang wrote later, writing is a technology. which means that a literary person is someone whose thought processes are technologically mediated. We became cognitive cyborg as soon as we become fluent readers, and the consequences of that were profound. It made me think of myself. Maybe I was a pictorial cyborg, but installed with a alphabetical software, and perhaps Core Dictionary exists as a glitch, persistently not functioning, where language is unlinked from usage and writing is unlinked from sound. Another book that I want to bring into the conversation today is Nicolas Borea, Inclusions, or Inclusive Aesthetics. He was most famous for his book in the 90s, Relational Aesthetics, where he described this trend of artists creating situations and interactions, and that is a sculpture. That interaction was the thing. And his new book enlarged such relational aesthetics into different species. And he wrote, human languages enable us to collect, decode, and over-determine, which does not mean dominant, the signs emitted on the earth. In a way, language has to do with bacteriology. It transmits, splices, and coagulates, playing physical reality a role analogous to that of bacteria in human body. It is a human delegation into non-human realms and belongs to the sphere of diplomacy. He quoted Foucault, although it's not so fashionable to quote Foucault anymore, but this sentence I think is still rather brilliant. He said, language is an archive like a tree. Not the tree is like language, but language is like a tree. Language is not something human invented and then imposed onto the nature. Actually, language is the fruit on the tree. Language comes out of us, who come out of nature. And what does he mean by the signs emitted on earth? I do think if there's no language and no traditional poetry, it will be quite difficult and perhaps unbearable to be encountered with, say, a starry night or a full moon, if you don't have those familiar lines and emotionalities to respond to. So Nicolas Borea thinks that nature has been, quote-unquote, speaking to us, and language is something we need in order to receive and respond to that signals that surrounds us. This is actually the last page of my slides. And I do think I agree with him. Not only the shape of language, as we've seen earlier in the example of Mandarin Chinese and Tamil and Hangul, that are informed by human and non-human body. I also think that the things we want to say with the language has to do with nature. I think a lot of language has the expression of my love for you or my love for the country is as deep as the sea. And I don't think the sea is an inert metaphor. I think if there's not a sea, maybe we won't know depths, or we won't have the understanding of depths as deep. So the sea is teaching us the meaning of depths, and that's why it entered our language, and that's why we have such word in our language. Is my view of the origin of languages. And I think I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Paul has microphones. Everyone has questions for Yuchen. Please raise your hand and he will send it.
Hello, my name's Adeline. It was really beautiful and lovely. My question is sort of going along with without the sea we would not know the depths. And coral is often, associated with the sea, with water. What would bringing this dictionary, this language to landlocked states, people who have never seen the ocean or seen coral, what would that be like? What would you expect from that, I guess?
I can use this, thank you. That's a really good question. As I mentioned, the island I did the residency was very small, which means I could see water whichever direction I look. So there's always something shifting and trembling in my sight. So much that when I left the island, I went back to my Brooklyn basement because there was only walls around me. I had a reverse seasick that I was dizzy for a couple of days because of how still my surrounding was. And I grew up in a place that's famous for its dryness, so water was a very foreign presence for me. Even though I went to school in, for example, Chicago, New York, there are always some presence of water, but it's always framed by the cityscape. On the island, it was different. Our existence was so arbitrary, but the ocean was the more truthful and permanent presence. And I do think this constant motion and trembling had a lot to do with my opening up with my literacy. In a way, like my brain was being shaken every day for months, so that its formal prejudice and education broke apart, that I was able to receive signals from the coral. Perhaps I am an example of someone who was not exposed to water yet can still connect to the water. But I think what you're pointing at also is a more realistic question. Because Coral Dictionary so far still circulate under the umbrella of art, so that it circulates in places that has more art infrastructure. For example, I've showed in Singapore, but I have not showed in Malaysia, even though they're like right next to each other. But Singapore has more of a contemporary art infrastructure in which I, as a commodity, can circulate to, so that it hasn't been able to really go back to where it came from. That is a pity. However, the residency where this whole thing began has dissolved. Nobody that was crucial to the project is still there, and I don't know if I can make it back. So on that level, that is a regret on my part too. Thank you.
Could you tell us again where the name of the island and where it was located geographically? You may have done that earlier, but I missed it. And also, I'm wondering, certainly you deal a lot with the shape and form of the coral. I wondered how much what the living coral did and how it functioned and stayed alive, how that fits into what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. The island was called Pulau Dinawan. Pulau means island, so the island's name is Dinawan, and it is in Malaysia, in the state of Sabah, and the closest big city where I bought the dictionary from is called Kota Kinabalu, which you can actually see. Kota Kinabalu is across the water. Living corals play the part in the way that they're not in it, because I saw a lot of living corals there, and I just knew, even without any warning, but I have this very intuitive knowledge that I shouldn't touch them. I believe that they probably emitted, if they were also emitting signals, that signal was, "You're in my territory," and I retreated to different area of water to swim. They are dying massively all over the planet, and they have this compounded, mysterious, complicated structure and this marine foreignness that made me felt intimidated, and I don't think I can ever work with them. In fact, on the beach closer to the water, you can see corals that are still a bit fleshy, and I did not pick them up. I know I shouldn't, but also I won't be able to work with them. And the reason for that, I'm still trying to understand. Maybe one story can help us understand. Is by a poet, Liang Li. He said that when he was little, his father told him to say thank you with every inhale and goodbye with every exhale. When we inhale, there's more oxygen in the blood, we're slightly bigger and there's more vitality. But when we exhale, the air is waste and you're decaying a little bit. And Liang Li kept on thinking about this now as a poet and realized that every utterance, every act of speech, including poetry, are made with exhale. So he said that the substrate of poetry is death, so that there is a negative relationship between vitality and meaning. Meaning arrive after vitality. I think if we bring it to a more mundane level, when you write down in your journal, today was a good day, that's a hindsight. The day is past. So I think maybe because the corals on the beach that have died long ago no longer have their own vitality, that allow me to project my own, that allow me to read their meanings, because they're no longer generating vitality and meaning in themselves. And another reason, sorry, I'm like really interested in analyzing myself, so I have a lot of thoughts on this. Another reason why could be that I went to art school in China and I studied drawing through this school that's called Chistyakov system, which was introduced from Soviet Union to China in the 50s, and it's still the art education structure now. And I have this skill that I have been bothered by for many years until I encountered corals. Somehow the texture, the dryness, and the porousness of the coral just really fit my skill, my body memory of how to use a pencil on a piece of paper. So that was my chosen objects to translate.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Radwan Marcus. I'd like to thank you first of all for this truly inspiring talk and for this amazing idea. My question relates to the concept of translation. So if I understand correctly, the new language is largely based on this one dictionary, and the primary concept comes from this Malay language. But have you started to feel that this is in a way something independent, something new, and that it functions in terms of syntax and grammar, for instance, as an independent language as well?
Thank you. That's a really important question too. It is true that residency was short, the project is long, so I think maybe its original tie to Malay language is less and less significant in my daily work nowadays. I forgot to mention that it was in this dictionary that I realized that Malay is written with Roman letters. That is a result of British colonization. After their independence, they consolidated the Roman spelling and made it the new national language, which was part of a new national identity campaign. And before that, Malay was spelled with Arabic letters because of the influence of Islamization. And before that, it was spelled from Sumatra letters. So Malay never had its own script, even though Bahasa Malayu as an oral language is widely spoken by millions of people and for thousands of years. This was a shock to me, coming from my Chinese linguistic sensibility, where the shape, sound, and meaning of the language has always been intact. And many have argued that this contributed to the stability of the empire, because no matter what language you speak, you read and write this and you pay me tax. You are, your national identity is stabilized by the written language, which has a lot to do with taxation, with accounting, with identification. So the fluidity of between Malay oral language and written language, even though has a lot of violence embedded, still to me revelation. Strength of a language doesn't have to lie in its authenticity or accuracy, but it can be in its flexibility and its openness and its looseness. No matter what language they have to learn to read or write in school, they always have this secret and ungovernable tongue, because it's intangible, that is Bahasa Malayu. So I'm making this script not because Malay needs one, but because I wanted to respond and I wanted to participate in this intricate ecology made of different languages. And the reason why I have 3 lines in the drawings is because every public text you see in Kota Kinabalu, like in museum or in 7-Eleven, is in 3 lines. So there's not a attachment or obsession with unification, because there are so many different peoples, there are just many different languages in official, formal platforms. In schools, there are Tamil elementary school, Chinese elementary school, Malay elementary school. So, sorry, that was a pretty long answer. So even though Malay language itself might no longer be that central to Coral Dictionary, the project, but the fluidity and the complicated and open network of languages that I was exposed to in Malaysia is still the central feel to the project, if that makes sense.
Very much so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was really wonderful. But I think what strikes me is the fact that the corals are preformed and that you, I suppose, interpret or project meaning onto them. And I wondered if you ever felt like changing for another texture where you can shape, I don't know, wood where you could carve it, or iron where you could cast it, where you have more control over the shape. Because this, I suppose, you're responding to the ecology of something that is found and something that is a remnant. But it seems that your agency in it is an agency which is in how you perceive the shape and how you connect it to the dictionary. So are you ever tempted to give yourself more agency in the objects that you that you might make?
Yeah, that's such an insightful comment and question. I not only I don't have agency of how the language is shaped, I don't even have agency of what is being said with the language, because I have not said anything myself yet. In the past 6 years, I've been translating sentences in the dictionary, probably was said now 50 years ago by someone I've never met. And it is true that my agency is only that moment of translation when I'm alone in my studio and I decide that this coral means this meaning. And I guess it's not it's not an issue for me. Actually, I feel maybe a lot of translators can feel this way too. I feel so much freedom in the lack of agency. I do think the way I transcribe or drawing the chorals down to every pore is where the fidelity of my translation lies, and I feel my obsession and pride is in that fidelity. And a word that I've translated, say, 6 years ago will still stay true to me. So I think there is also consistency in my translation. I try to make friends with linguists, and very often they will come to my studio and say, oh, this is so poetic, but they don't discuss grammar with me. But I do think in many ways this is more language than it is art, so that I'm not bothered by the lack of agency in the day-to-day work. In the day-to-day work, it feels like an office job. I have everything set up.
But I thought the example where you said you were away and your friend had a book which was called Little Bowl, and so then you decided that all and bowl was the same. Is that determined by a question of sound, or is it a question of shape?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. Yes, I take some liberties sometimes. I guess there's no real division between agency and like obligation and artistic creativity. In the example of Little Bow, it was a decision probably informed by both the phonetic and the formal dimension, like bo and fo sound similar, and in Mandarin van and man also sound similar, and maybe there's some truth to that. And the fact that a bowl is expected to be filled, or I think a full bowl of rice, like these associations probably come to me so quickly that I sometimes cannot decipher. But there are also times where I've realized, sometimes with horror or surprise, that a word that I thought, for example, the word of importance, I pick a choral that is heavier on the head. It's like a trophy that shows a dignity. And 3 months later, I realized the contour of the choral looks just like a Mandarin word for importance or weight. When I rejected my own impulse to learn ASL, I think I had this false ideal of a language being pure. Like, I don't want choral dictionary to be influenced by ASL that much. However, of course it is impure because I am not impure. I am contaminated by my formal exposure to languages such as Mandarin and English. Maybe the fact that they're so different, one primarily ideogram and pictorial, the other alphabetical, have some countering effect. Yet I am still a product of all the life experience and linguistic experience I've had. So in terms of the bo and fo, it's a great example of how something I think is a leap is actually probably very much culturally grounded as well. Thank you.
Thank you for so eloquently letting us into your world. It's so beautiful to see this. My question is based on the choral itself. I'm curious how the colors arrive, like what is the difference between the white and the black? And do you consider how long the coral has been in the water for, considering the wear and tear would give you smoother surfaces opposed to the sharper ones? So thinking a bit more about the biology and whether you incorporated that into your translation.
Thank you. That's a really good question. But sadly, my knowledge of coral in terms of its biological complexity is very shallow. The corals, some of them are darker, some of them are lighter, and I do take that into consideration of the translation. words that are more ethereal, more intangible, or abstract tend to be lighter. Words that felt heavy and earthy are darker. However, they are a range of different white. There's no black or red corals in my collection, as they have been dehydrated and bleached, exposed to the really, really intense sun for many years. I don't know how long before I've encountered them. And I don't know how long they've lived underwater before that either. Once someone came to my studio and picked up one smaller coral and said, "This is not coral, this is fish bone." And I was very shocked, but decided to pretend that didn't happen.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I wanted to ask you about your title that you chose and this idea of the different forms of the language, from book to tattoo. And you said something really interesting about the legitimacy of the dictionary. My dad is Malaysian and he has a blue copy of that dictionary that he brought with him to the UK, and it has very different valences for me. But I was thinking about this idea of like legitimacy of the dictionary, how you felt about, whether you could say a bit more about that. And how that compares to the way your language might or might not circulate from a tattoo on your individual person's body to the book.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Just maybe just a little bit more about the idea of like the legitimacy of the dictionary and putting it into a book form, how that felt. And yeah, these different forms of circulation the language can have based on also performance as well. It was really interesting to see communally creating meaning from different new pieces as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I didn't know that dictionary has blue version. I did have, sometimes in open studio, someone would tell me, I used this when I was in school growing up in Malaysia. But more comments I got nowadays is, well, I haven't seen a dictionary for so long. On the one hand, I say having the form of a paper dictionary makes the language more legit. On the other hand, I also have to admit that it is no longer the predominant medium for how knowledge circulates anymore. I was actually really shaken today. I was in an Uber and the driver, I don't know if it was the situation was made for me or not. The driver was watching a documentary about China and its robotic dog and the robot doing Tai Chi and how people can pay with their palm. And these all happened after I left the country. Not that I'm not aware of it. I guess I'm shaken by the fact that that's how the world read it and that's how it presents itself to the world. Which makes me think, of course, Core Dictionary and its handwritten and its non-circulatable complexity and its small, this is a very small publisher. We are only selling to bookstores that we know and people that we know. That how archaic all this effort is, how small these gestures are, which doesn't, of course, take away my passion and commitment to it. But I do think when I use words like legitimacy and distribution, I am being a little ironic too. I do understand that I can't implement this language nationally. I do understand that it is English. It's so popular not only because of its colonial and imperial history, but also it is a very economic language. It's only 24 letters. I can complain about English all day long. It doesn't make sense in so many ways, but I do appreciate it because with it I can talk to all of you. I think it will be less likely that you will all learn Core Dictionary and talk to me. So when I think of the question of distribution a lot, also has to do with my work in art publishing and like really working in art publishing. I worked in a bookstore for 7 years, and I think I will talk more about that side of my work tomorrow in the workshop. We will be making books. But Printed Matter is an organization I worked for, which was founded by soloist Lucilla Part, artists who wanted to make a book that galleries didn't take seriously because they're too cheap, and libraries don't take seriously because they contain no information. Ed Rocher submitted 26 gasoline station to Congress Library and was rejected for the lack of information. And later, when he was more recognized as an artist, this book was cataloged in New York Public Library under transportation instead of art, because he still can't find a place in the system of knowledge. And Printed Matter is an organization birthed out of that lack of space. It is a space for all the weird books made like by elbowing out space and asking money for all possible ways. And we work on consignment. Sorry, I quit many years ago. I still say we. Printed Matter works on consignment model mostly, and artists come and bring 4 copies of what they've made, and we have this record of supplier, and there's a form and there's entry in the database. So much work for probably $5 in the end, and it doesn't make sense in terms of labor and resource, but that is its mission, is to distribute these absurd, ridiculous, and purposeless publications. So I think I'm probably more influenced by this tradition of conceptual art more than I'm aware of. And when I use the word distribution, it is a word actually I learned while working there. We distribute, we disseminate, we promote. Those were the words that we use for grant applications all day long.
Take one more question.
Hi, thank you for, I'm just so moved by like the beauty of it all. I wanted to ask about what the corals like sound like in your head. In your head, are they mainly like translated into like the languages that you know, English or Malay or Chinese? When I was looking at the corals and your illustrations, I was reminded of how because Chinese characters are imported into Japanese, that sometimes you don't know how to read them, but we can intuit what the meaning is because of the like what it's made up of, but it's sort of like sonically it's silent, but visually it communicates something. So I was wondering if the corals are doing the same thing in your head, and maybe like your impulse to want to teach the corals is actually like you voicing or somehow communicating for them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe there's a void of sound and I seek the opportunity, or I felt that there should be sound. In the beginning though, on the island, I invited a friend to record 182 sentences in the dictionary that I was initially drawn to. So that's the original, the classical phonetic dimension of this work, and I do listen to them. It was reported he works on the island. He makes food for us and the construction workers, and people call him Prince. I don't know why. Maybe he's a royal of some tribe, or he was just very elegant. He spoke good English, better than mine probably, and he was very helpful and influential in the project, and his voice is the soundtrack in my head. Even though I haven't learned to reproduce them myself, I can say some words, but his cadence too is, I think, the soundtrack of Core Dictionary. And another sound I can think of is actually pencil rubbling against paper. In that way, I guess it's when it doesn't really fit the history or the definition of a language. In a very long period of time, linguistic as a discipline was rooted in Latin and alphabetical language. Pictorial language were considered to be more primitive because the evolution of language was considered to be where picture express meaning to symbols express sound. And in fact, in late 19th, early 20th century, a lot of Chinese intellectuals wanted to abandon Chinese character and Romanize the language, including Lu Xun, Qian Xuantong, because they think Chinese character is one, too complicated, therefore privileged, only a few could learn. Two, it's a decadence from feudal society. It contains all the poison, the hierarchy. And three, that it's not phonetic and alphabetical, so that it cannot be compatible with modern science and technology. And fueled by also international proletarianism, this was a very influential campaign. Although the country was too big, it just can't be eradicated like many other places. But it was simplified greatly. And when I visited Taipei and these many bookstores for the first time, I was really had this dizzy sensation when I open in books and see the characters I know actually has more parts. It's like encountering lost limbs, just realizing what was there and not anymore. I think in that way, Coral Dictionary is also a wounded, obviously fragmented, sedimented, dated too. Not only the corals are dated, the sentences, the stories are from 50 years ago. Language as well. So I forgot what was your question. Yes.
Thank you.